Well, let me introduce you then, Nancy,
It's
so that
time.
we can start this wonderful webinar. Okay, this webinar will be on women, especially those with families. Okay, I'm sure many have found how, shall we say, more tough it was for women with families to go through this time of crisis. And our speaker will be Nancy Bocskor, who has this long CV of accomplishments. I don't know where to begin or what to say, but I'll just start with a democracy coach, okay? And she's a director of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at Texas Women's University in Denton. And I think she has founded several programs and has helped so many women in their lives and empowered them. And she's also the author of Go Fish, How to Catch and Keep Contributors. It's a practical guide for fundraising. And the list goes on, Nancy. I'll take the whole webinar just introducing you.
Yes.
Yes.
You can read the bio. And Dina, the most important thing is that I've come and spent and have had 3 trips with you. So
Yes.
We've gotten to spend time together in Cairo, which has always been wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Nancy, we'll enjoy your company for this hour, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, good morning all, or good afternoon. I know it's a long day, and I appreciate your joining me. And while Dina gave me the topic of helping women cope, I know that there are men on the call, so I just want you to know I love men. Don't get me wrong. But it is known universally that women tend to multitask better. We are always in charge of everything. You ask a woman, oh, do you have a Band-Aid in your purse? And most women will dig through their purse, they'll find a Band-Aid. What do you need? So women are always over-prepared for everything. And when you're over-prepared, it means you overthink. And so today I want to talk about emotional first aid in this pandemic. We're going to talk about our personal lives and how people are coping. I want to talk to you a little bit about our business lives, because that certainly has been turned upside down. But I want to end with the point that my favorite saying is by an old English clergyman, more than 100 years ago, said, "Change is difficult, to not change is fatal." And right now, we are making incredibly difficult changes. I never thought I would use the word pivot. I mean, I must use the word pivot 70 times during a day, right? Because all of our in-person transactions, our conversations, our trainings have now pivoted to webinars. Most of the world has become a genius at using Zoom just in a matter of a few weeks. I barely knew what Zoom was 3 months ago, and now I have a full subscription. So we're going to talk about some of this, but I want to leave time for questions because there's so much information. But as Dina knows, I love personal stories, and I want to share one with you because I think that part of this being in isolation, the last more than 2 months for many people, has made everyone reflect on what's important, what isn't, and what our next step in life is. I have always enjoyed reinventing myself. You know, every 10 years in my career, I've figured out, what do I want to do next? I've done this, I've mastered it. What's the next thing? And I took a really big leap of faith when I left my home and sold it in Washington, D.C. after 39 years and moved to Denton, Texas 20 months ago. Denton is outside of Dallas, Texas, and I took a job where I am launching and have launched the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at Texas Women's University. So 20 months ago, I took a real leap of faith by deciding to move to Texas. Now, Texas Women's University is the largest public university primarily for women in the United States. 92% of our students are women. It is also the 5th most diverse. We have Hispanics, Asian, Blacks, whites. It is a very diverse student body. And 70% of our campus have never been outside of Dallas. It is a lot of students who had never gone to college before. And so when I came down here, I really saw my mission as opening doors for people who didn't know there was a door. So all of us have to have these mission statements, whether we're in isolation or not. And now we're all pivoting on how we can continue to serve others. So in February, my mother, Phyllis, as many of my Egyptian friends have heard about her in my previous lectures, my mom fell twice. The first time was she didn't remember falling, but the second time she fell badly enough that she had a concussion and a leg wound. And I flew home to Ohio, she's from, and I spent 5 days preparing to move her into a lovely 1-bedroom apartment in an assisted living facility. We had had the movers come. We kept telling my mom that her home was no longer safe. It had many stairs. Now, my mother is still very feisty at almost 95 years old. And so when we put on the calendar that she was moving on March 23rd, she took a red pen and put not moving day, because my mother did not want to move. My mother does not want to change, even though her life has changed. So we couldn't even, yet the pandemic hit. We were unable to move her into assisted living. My sister was going over multiple times a day. Mom, because of the concussion, her dementia has increased. And so, believe it or not, 2.5 weeks ago, I asked my sister, do I need to move home? Because we have decided we will not move her into assisted living. She needs and deserves to be cared for in a home, and now in a family home. And so I am, with 5 days notice, I resigned my job just a little bit more than 2 weeks ago and said, I am moving back to Ohio. Now, here's the good news. I am buying a house that's large enough that my mother has one wing, I have one wing, and we're hiding the knives in the kitchen because my mother, let's just say, some people may think I'm bossy. I think I have leadership skills, but I learned those from my mother. And at the end of the day, I live the life I have today that my mother would have lived had she not been born in 1925 Ohio during the Depression, where the only options for women were nurses, teachers, or secretaries. And she has opened every door, just like I've opened doors for women and young men here in Texas. My mother made this happen for me. And so I am packing up. You can see the boxes, but I am going to be moving back to Ohio. I will still be able to write, teach, and speak. So I'm looking forward to my next trip to Cairo. But having said that, I want to be around to make sure she has breakfast in the morning and she gets her daily newspaper. And it's the least I can do. Now, it is probably one of the biggest changes of my life. I have not lived in my hometown since I was 18 years old. Let's just say that was more than 40 years ago. But all of us during this isolation, as I was sitting in my house, realizing it was just me, that we decide what's important. And so I think when all of us come out of this, and I hope we come out of it soon, we're all going to start looking at what we do and what we did in our old lives a little bit differently. A lot of corporations here in America have had to have their employees work from home, the telecommuting. And they actually are more productive telecommuting than they ever were when they were in the office. Yes, we have Zoom calls, but at least I can see you on a Zoom call, right? I can look at your eyes, I can read your facial expression. Because part of the challenge before we all pivoted to Zoom is that when we communicate by email, there is no context. What we think sounds like just a fine email to ask somebody to do something, it could be misread in so many ways. And so I've been reminding my staff and others to give people more grace during this period. Everyone's stressed. We don't know what the future brings. And so when we communicate, sometimes it may seem more abrupt. But I find with our Zoom calls, when we have a meeting, I can read Dina's facial expressions right now, right? I can tell if she's engaged, if she has questions. And so I think that this face-to-face, but focused face-to-face, has been so important as we are going through this change. So my topic was emotional first aid during this pandemic. And I must admit that I borrowed this with permission from one of my former students from the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University, and her colleague who wrote a column in April with this same title. And so let's talk a little bit about how we're all feeling right now. First of all, we have to recognize the emotions we're feeling. There's nothing worse than living with this stress of no sleeping. Where are we going to get food? There's even meat shortages now in the United States. One of the parts I love about Cairo is going to all the open markets, where we get our food. And we're missing that. So I think that everyone's emotion can be like a piano, right? Every piano key has its own tone and sound, and we all react to stress differently. My stress was after I knew that we could not move our mother, because this pandemic has showed the world the underbelly of elder care in the world. There's been so many deaths, and we did not want to give my mother a death sentence. And for me, the stress is, I can't eat, I can't sleep. But once I made the decision to resign, I felt like a weight was lifted off of my back. Even though I'm quitting a major job in a pandemic, I decided it was the right decision for me. And so I think that we all have to recognize and measure these emotions. For a lot of people, it's writing, it's journaling. And in my world, as Dina knows, journaling for me is when I write these long Facebook posts, or I recall memories. Like, 5 years ago today, I was in Cairo, and here's what we were doing. Because we have to keep pulling back these positive memories of things, of what it used to be, but what we're looking forward to in the future. I had 13 trips canceled for March and April. And I get my energy. As you can probably tell, I am an extrovert. I get my energy from other people. And when I'm by myself, I overthink everything and I lose my energy. It is hard for me to stay awake. And being able to speak to a crowd, even via webinar, helps me connect with other people. So we all have to figure out, what is it that we do? And I may not keep a daily journal, but I do write a lot on Facebook. And a lot of people appreciate that because I am sharing things that they are feeling. And because I am more out there publicly than most, people can say, wow, I thought the same thing, but I was scared to say it. You have to figure out, deconstruct what's underneath all of these emotions. Right now, for people, again, using the pivot word, for women in particular, when they are working at home, there's children. So now, in America and elsewhere, my friends have to homeschool their kids, still have a business, do what they need to do with their work. They're still managing the meals, doing the laundry, making sure the dogs and cats get fed. But it is just added another layer to all of these responsibilities. And it certainly has for men as well, because in many cases, men and women have been abruptly furloughed or let go from their jobs because there's no income in the business right now. So everyone is more stressed. So I think you need to take a step back and see what was there to start with. What were some of the communication problems you were having with kids or your husband or wife? And remember how in times of panic, these emotions are magnified. Things that you used to just think was a cute quirk from your spouse, all of a sudden when you're there 24 hours, 7 days a week, you're going, how did I marry this person? But remind yourself, this too shall pass. And so figure it out, you know, deconstruct what's there, assess what was there, what was good about it, and try to focus on those good things, because you're going to have to reset what you do with your daily life. There was a research paper out last week that women in academia have not been doing the research, working on their PhDs and their thesis, because there's not enough time in the day, because all of a sudden they're doing childcare and making sure that their elderly parents are okay as well. We're all worried about them. And for many people, they've not even been able to see their grandparents in 2 months now. So everyone's learning to communicate in this new way. So you always have to notice, you know, what is the energy you're feeling right now? You know, articulate it. Part of it is, can you put on a mask and go take a walk? I find that just leaving my house to go get the mail or to do something in the yard at least gets me out from these 4 walls that have surrounded me. How are you intentional about dealing with some of these emotions? What are you thinking about? I really see this time as resetting, as helping your children gain independence. Most of us are so busy. You know, I keep reading on Facebook that people are baking bread again. Oh my gosh, for a while in America, you couldn't buy yeast because people are returning to their roots. When you can't accomplish big things because you cannot leave your house, imagine what you can accomplish in your home. And for some people, it's doing an arts and crafts project. I have a friend that is now doing things to the outside of her house that she hadn't had time to do. She's been power washing the windows and doing things, because activity helps your brain calm down. We don't feel like we are so powerless when we seize control of something. This is the time to teach your children. You know, I've told women around the world, if you could teach your sons and daughters how to make a peanut butter sandwich or a simple meal, you are giving them such independence, because you're their mother or father. You're not their maid. You will make them better people in the future because they can seize control and have outcomes. So homeschooling, you may not be able to teach your child calculus because, well, some of us didn't take calculus in high school, but there are tasks around your house, whether it is helping with the laundry. My job as a child was folding my dad's socks. That was a big job for me when I was probably 4 or 5. But these were small tasks that I could learn, master, and I felt like I was contributing. So take a look at what are other learning opportunities that keep your children and your spouse and your family on a purposeful task. There are a lot of people out there who are cleaning out their houses. I mean, just doing things, getting rid of old clothes. One of the things I find most meaningful is I'm looking for new ways to spend time. I've been volunteering at a dog rescue here in rural Texas. They have more than 200 dogs. I have 4 cats, which my friends in Egypt know about. But having said that, they don't have a lot of volunteers right now. They don't have a lot of money. They're still needing people. And so I would go out there and walk the dogs. And whenever you volunteer for someone else, whenever you help someone, you make a phone call, you make a connection, we feel better about ourselves. It makes our endorphins work. And anytime I'm not in my head thinking about all of these problems during this pandemic, I have really focused more on helping other people and still maintaining my work, but making sure I'm working during working hours. And that's hard. I always work. I'll work at 9 o'clock at night, but now you have to reflect on that and go, what's a more manageable time? Some of my friends with children have actually put on their emails that they're not available from noon to 1 because that's family time. Or the husband and wife are figuring out times where if there are important work-related activities, that one spouse will be available during this time for the children while the other spouse can go about their own work. And so as you're moving through this, just like when we get on an airplane and we learn about the oxygen mask, they always say, put on your own mask first. Put on your own mask first during this. I used to think the term self-care was a little over-promoted, but I think we need to take care of ourselves more right now. Things that would bother me in the past. I was telling Dina that my old Mac is so old, it wouldn't let me do Zoom. So I have Zoom on the iPad today. And instead of in the setting I usually have as my background, you get to see boxes. Now, you may think, oh, come on, Nancy, but I am very much in control of my surroundings. So I have to remember to put on my own mask. And it may just mean going and watching mindless television, or what I like to do, I have spent a lot of time on the telephone calling old friends because I need that connection. For the first 6 weeks, I was so buried in my work and how I was pivoting to telecommuting and making a lot of webinars for my students. I kept forgetting to take care of me. And I don't need a lot of time. Some people need more, but you have to really tap into your own emotion and be compassionate for yourself, because we forget to be compassionate. Usually, and women in particular, we're really hard on ourselves. Why can't I do everything? Well, it's tough. So you have to learn to manage your expectations and see this as a time of creating independence and new growth for the people around you, and not always being the perfectionist. So other tips when I've been reading, stay informed, but don't obsessively check the news. For a while, I had the news on all the time. I would wake up to the news, I would go to sleep. I would check Facebook, I would read all of the news sources, and I had to dial back on that. I certainly still have on the news, but maybe just for an hour. Be very careful. There are so many rumors going around. Please do fact checking. My gosh, the number of people who put fake news. If somebody could hit their mute button, please, and then we'll answer your questions. Sorry about that. I'll have to go to chat in a moment, just a second. But step away from Facebook if you need to. Instead of talking about the pandemic, that's when I started talking about remembrances from the past. Let's think of these good things that we will return to, because hope springs eternal. Be careful about what you do share with others. Check out your sources. People in America actually were drinking bleach because they thought it would do something about killing the coronavirus. There's a question. Do you think this pandemic is a good chance for society to revise gender roles? Yes, I do. We everywhere in the world, women are always the ones who have to be in charge of everything, and I think we all laugh about that, right? We laugh about it. There are certainly comics, there are TV shows about it. I mean, we all just kind of roll our eyes and go, yeah, well, it goes back to when I advise people who are running for office. I have never met a man, and I have worked in politics more than 40 years. I've never met a male candidate who was asked, who will take care of your children since you are running for office? Yet still in 2020, women candidates are asked, who will take care of your children? Well, you know, I had another person to help make this child, right? There is someone else in the picture. And so right now we have seen an article after article, including my own chancellor, Corrine Phaeton, wrote an article in the Dallas Morning News about how women have really stepped up in this pandemic. Around the world, we've seen Germany, Iceland, these countries where women are the world leaders. And keep in mind, there's only 10 countries where women are world leaders out of several hundred. But those are the countries where women came up with compassion, action, lack of ego. They were doing the right thing. We didn't always ask what's in it for them. So I also have found around the world, women tend to be less corrupt, right? It's not like there's not corruption in women in government, but we have always found that women tend to be more focused on the people in their community. So when we look at this, I think it is time to take a look at those gender roles and how you both can work together. And it may be too late in your own marriage, right? There's a lot of things that are very traditional around the world. But this is, for children right now, this is your opportunity, I think, to really make daily life more of a game for kids. Make it something, it's a task, it's a game. Who can fold the socks the fastest, right? Whatever it is. But my own mother, who always just made sure that, my mom and dad said, yes, you can be president, but you still have to, you still have to be making sure your bed is made every day. There's another question here. Let me go to that real quick. So how do you think we could promote it? Well, every family is going to be different. I think that it really is, because you are, as a wife and mother, you are the head of the household. Now, men think they are, right? They are the titular head of the household in traditional society. But I think now it is an opportunity for the mother to be the head of the household in terms of what's happening in this space where we are here 24/7. How are we going to learn to do more things? Having a task chart, like who's going to wash the dishes or put them away, but making sure that that is written down. Remember, there's an old saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. I have, just to prepare for this huge move, I have a spreadsheet of activities, and every day I go, okay, here's what I need to do. And if I can task them to other people, I write that down there. So, we talk about just all this news and everything, and part of it is, what are things we can control, which is part of our health. So things you can control, making sure your children are practicing safe hygiene, avoiding crowds, being a responsible role model. And you need to plan for what you can do. Again, writing down, what are you worried about? You don't want to scare your family, but you want to be honest with them. What are some lists of possible solutions to make this better? Because there's nothing worse in an unhappy household when you're there and you can barely get away. What brings you joy? In America and elsewhere, people are putting puzzles together again, right? They're looking for activities that are bringing the family together. What are some things are very contract, or, very things that we can change? Well, again, how do we make the daily tasks that most women traditionally do, how do we start presenting those as an opportunity to learn. Yes, it may not be calculus, but trust me, you know, every man that learns how to take out the garbage or helps around the house, there's a saying I don't like, but a lot of people use it, that's called happy wife, happy life. Now that sounds so 1950s, but you have to assume your role in a different way as head of household, since you're here all the time. Everyone can have their role. People can still be in charge of specific tasks, but you've got to look at your day a little bit differently. You really have to focus on that mental part of how do you stay connected with others. As I said earlier, make it a priority, whether it is every morning my niece FaceTimes me so I can speak to my mother. Even when I move back, I'm not going to be able to see her. But you know, face-to-face really is a vitamin for your mental health. Even on this webinar, it's wonderful to keep seeing when these photos come up. Emotions are contagious. Think about that. Emotions are contagious, so choose carefully about who you're sharing intense emotions with. You know, our tempers can be, you know, people are losing their temper easily. Try to dial that back. And I know it's hard. It can be frustrating. But when you lose your temper, the whole household is upended. It's why, again, the whole email situation where we give people grace. No one has ever dealt with a situation like this before. We're all learning. But when you are sharing emotions, because they are contagious, be mindful. Are you sharing your emotions with somebody who's a negative person all the time? It just says the world's coming to an end. Okay, that's not going to get you the outcome you want. You know, you have to have trust. Who do you trust? Building that trust asset is critical. So I do miss personal hugs. So be careful about who you use as that sounding board. When I was talking to people about all of a sudden quitting a job in a pandemic and moving back, I have one friend who's very practical, who's all worried about, but Nancy, what about the money? How are you going to earn a living? All of these things that of course. And I said, Patty, I know this is always going to be your concern. I've known her for me 35 years ago. And Patty came from a very poor family. I mean, there was never a lot of money. So for her, financial security is the most important thing. For me, it is emotional security. So I've known her for so long that when she was asking me these financial questions, I went, you know, Patty, this is not as big a worry as it is for you. And I will cope because I had my own business for 30 years. All I have to do is restart it again. So you have to understand, what's the other person's point of view? Turn to the people in your life who are thoughtful, level-headed, and really a good listener. We all need an extra dose of empathy these days. Oh my gosh, that compassion. And for those people, it's not, you know, there are just some people out there that compassion is not in their vocabulary. Try to find people that are. We've talked a lot about this, being kind to yourself. I know in Cairo it's hard because it's such a big city, but is there any place where that you can get away for a walk? Go look at some palm trees, go look at the beautiful flowering trees. But try to figure out just that change of scenery, even for 15 minutes helps. Again, in my office, I had 5 staffers. We would have a Zoom call 2 days a week at 11 a.m. And instead of saying, So what's the really bad thing in your life right now? I would open the call on, tell me something that you've learned during this isolation, or something you've experienced that was unexpected that you're actually enjoying more. And you know, it pivoted, again, my favorite word. It changed everybody's mindset to something that they enjoyed. My deputy director has 2 teenage sons, and all of a sudden they have assumed that they are chefs. In fact, they ordered chef hats, those white hats. They got their own aprons. And so a few nights a week, they've been creating their own food because they thought it was fun. So she really enjoyed seeing her teenagers embrace, oh, I think I'm going to be the chef. Another person just really enjoyed the fact that every morning she usually had to get her grandchildren fixed for school. She had to prepare, meals and get all of this done and still get to work by 8 a.m. She said that not commuting to being at home gave her more time to reflect and think, and not always being in a rush on, I must get at my desk at 8 o'clock. She's much more relaxed now. One of them is with her significant other. She's gotten to spend more time with him because he's not on the road all the time. So they're really learning more about each other. So in business situations, I suggest start with the positive, because we're all going to hear about the complaints. But this pandemic has again brought us some good things. So ask your staff, tell me about something good. And then they can just, again, tell you about some of the challenges they're facing. And you, as an inspirational leader and as a problem solver, can kind of dig deep and figure out what are some other ways. I have one of my employees is homeschooling her granddaughter, and she really wants to be focused on that between 9 and 11 a.m. So I don't interrupt her between those times. I adhere to her needs. Now, I know she's still getting her work done, but we're not bound by being in an office from 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever those are. So that has been very helpful. I read a lot now on what we can do. And we're going to have to do task list. So we know when your spouse, again, has a meeting from 3 to 4, okay, can you make sure you don't have a meeting? Just so the kids aren't running around creating a ruckus. And with that, I'd like to open it up. I hope I gave you some good tips there. I mean, good golly, we go back to change is difficult, to not change is fatal. And all of us will get through this. Our ancestors have gone through a lot tougher, but it's a scary time, especially because everybody thinks he or she is a journalist. All this fake news, please try to you're educated people, try to get to the root. What is true, what isn't? Because otherwise, you all have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I want to give you hope today to lift that a little bit more. Make it be kinder to yourself. And with that, I'd like to take questions. Or comments. You can chat box, or you can just speak, whatever's easier for you. And if you all are having a different experience than I am, I would love to hear about that. What are some of the challenges you're having that I wouldn't have expected? Because every person on this earth is going through a different emotion right now. Hello, Suzanne. I can see you and wave to you. How do you maintain well-being and happiness in this working environment? I think as I had mentioned, I think the fact that many of us are homebound that time we would spend on a bus or in a car to go to work, take a step back, right? Take a longer shower, linger over breakfast, talk to people, talk to your family. And so I think that helps. To Diana's point, are you going to an office every day still, or are you housebound and working? Because that would help me expand upon that answer.
Yeah. We're at AUC. We're all housebound in Nancy.
Yeah.
And as you'd mentioned, of course, one of the good things is that no more we don't have to commute to work any longer, or even as we go, we don't go anywhere that much. So
Right.
Those long drives is no longer a part of our lives. And of course, this gives us more time to spend with family. We still do work online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah, but it's more what can you say? It's not as stressful as it was before. Just taking out this commute element from it makes it less stressful.
Well, I think it has, because you know, even on our campus is very large, kind of like yours is. And it, you know, invariably I'd have an 11 o'clock meeting one place, I'd have to get in the car or walk a long way to another. And in Texas, like Cairo, it is very hot. So I'm trying to just, you know, how can I better use my time? And it does mean that, especially moving forward in this whole new world of telecommuting, but what is the new normal going to look like? And, you know, we just decided as a university here in Texas that we are going to open again for the fall. For many of our professors, they had to immediately go from in classroom instruction to online. And many of them have never done that before. So I see this as we've all mastered Zoom. You know, what is a new skill now that you can add to your resume, as I like to say? And now we all of a sudden are learning so much more about online education and webinars. These are things we can do in the future to make our day less of a hassle. Looking at somebody, and instead of having a conference call at 10 o'clock, have a Zoom call. And I think there would be a lot fewer misunderstandings in the workplace if I could look at somebody face to face, even on a Zoom call. It's so much more efficient than a conference call where all I'm doing is listening. And as my friend Deb Sofield always says, who's an executive speech coach, you can tell when people are smiling on the telephone. But I can tell even more how you all are responding and thinking about some of the things that I asked you to reflect on. So embrace this time. This too shall pass. But I think it's a great way, as it, you know, the continuing questions of how do we put our family as a team rather than just the I'm in charge of everything. And that is difficult, and it all depends on your spouse. I understand, and we all have those issues. But it is writing things down and making it more of how do we make our day better, more fun, less stressful. Anyone else want to talk to me?
Suzanne, I think you didn't unmute your mic. We can't hear you.
Yes, unmute your mic.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Hello, Suzanne.
Hello, hi. I am Dr. Susan Fouad. I am the head of AUC clinic at Tahrir campus and the assistant director of medical department of the AUC. The problem is I am a responsible one, of course, and I'm a physician, and I know the situation of the COVID-19 around the world and at Egypt. So the problem, how to balance between the seriously of the disease in Egypt now,
Yes,
and to translate this in kind way to our people at the AUC community without causing a panic for them. This is.
By the way, Susan, let me look at your nails. Are those beautiful teal colored nails?
Yeah, but I am using the gloves.
So that's why, but see, I see those beautiful nails.
Yeah. No, of course.
I want to do
I didn't attend the clinic or anywhere without using the
glove. Well,
yes,
and you know what I'll do, Suzanne, is there has been my university where I am at Texas Women's University, more than 50% of our students are in the health related fields. Huge percentage. So our chancellor has been dealing with this a lot. And there are several things. Back in 2006, I was diagnosed with cancer. And part of my treatment when I went for my cancer treatment at the clinic, they actually had a therapist who dealt with patients who had cancer, and that was part of my treatment. And I would go see this therapist, and I would be so responsible, right? I said, I have all these clients. It is the middle of an election year. And I would just sit there and go, my gosh, I can't even tell my clients I have cancer because I'm afraid they'll fire me because I'm not serving them. And you know, one of the things she told me is, Nancy, cancer will change your life. I don't know what it will be, but you need to recognize that cancer is the problem, is the challenge right now, not your clients. And yes, I had to have extra staff to make sure all of my clients were taken care of. But you know, me, I had to make sure I was taken care of. And I will tell you, it was of all the pieces of advice was you will rethink your life. So it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that until you just asked me. It is seeking out people who are professionals in mental health and encouraging and making those people available just to share your scary thoughts, because we know right now our nurses and doctors are dying of care. You know, after I got treatment, that was when I then decided I wanted to change my life again. And so on that January, you have your mute on, so I can't hear you. But I just want to point out that it was then in that January that I decided to write, teach, and speak. I started working more internationally, and I made myself happy. And it's fascinating that during this pandemic, I am making another major life change on my mother is more important than my job. And so I think these pandemics make big things happen. Now, Suzanne, please unmute yourself because I can hear you talking, but I can't hear you. She's still muted. Suzanne, can't hear.
Yes. Now, I mean, for the patient, not me. I had a cancer as well, and I am fine with that. I have a good mood. Yes, I had already on 16, 17, 18. I am fine. I am talking about how
patients. Okay.
Yes, the panic of the patients, not me. I am good enough to know everything. I'm dealing with everything. Yes, it is.
Okay, but I thought you were referring to also the people who work for you, the nurses around you. So let's take that advice, but also share that with the healthcare workers who are also scared. So I think making sure there are avenues for them to speak to. I also think with patients right now, it is very difficult. Some are not able to speak because they have respirators in. I think that for some, they can't see their family. I think that what I have seen is, even if it is holding up an iPad, so the family can at least say, Mom or Dad or Grandma, I love you. I wish I could be with you. Stay strong. Yes, people are dying, but many, many, many are recovering. And I think we have to focus, even though I'm one that looks at the death total every day, I have to be reminded that depending on the patient, we may be able to get through this. But I think it is keeping those avenues of communication, whatever, even if it's holding up an iPhone and it's a FaceTime call, so the child or family member can say, Mom or Dad, I miss you, keep hanging in there. But it is these people who have died without ever having that one last, even if they can't speak, that has been devastating to people. So trying to, it is very hard to offer hope during this time, but hope is all we have. You know, and just using, I mean, thank goodness for technology, right? And where we do have some of those opportunities, and trying to help your patients find out beforehand, you can't go in, but let's try to do the next best thing.
Okay,
But
thank
also,
you.
I'm sorry to misunderstand, but I was thinking you were thinking of your staff, because
No.
our, you know, there was
They are good. Our staff are good. They are dealing well.
Because there was a doctor, a major doctor here in the United States, who had gotten the virus.
Yes.
And she committed suicide last week because she just couldn't cope. So everyone's mental health is just frayed. So I'm so happy you're glad everything's good, but I think it's so hard to not be hard on ourselves.
We are outpatient clinic. We are not involved in the quarantine or something like that.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, I had another question on chat. Let me open that up. What are some tips to enhance levels of concentration on work issues when everyone's worried about the pandemic? I think that I concentrate by what I call going into the zone, right? When I go into my bedroom or my office and I close down all my social media, I close down my email, I turn off my phone, and I sit there and go, I can get this done. It just has to be, I can't be distracted. I'm easily distracted. I'm like the dog that sees a squirrel and the dog runs after the squirrel. That's how my brain works. So I have to work very hard to concentrate during these times. But I set aside parts of the day for Nancy is focused versus Nancy's going to take an hour off and go watch some dumb television show, right? That distracts me. But I try to compartmentalize, I can't say it, compartmentalize the best I can. Other questions? So put your hand up. Has something been helpful here today that you can think about a little bit more? Do we have any hands, or did you know all of this? Oh, good. Thank you, Dina. I love the hands. It's all about the hands. But, you know, I'll take any other questions you may have. And I've said this many times, please, please be a little kinder to yourself. I am my own worst enemy. I am so hard on myself. And now in the middle of this move, I've got 4 people in my house doing boxes. There's so much to do. And you know what? I should have done more work last night, but I actually went to bed by 10:30 because I knew I had to be up and prepared. And for me to say I can't physically do anymore is a major issue for me, because I never get tired, but I had to take care of myself last night. And see this as a time where, again, teach your children independence. Learn to make some wonderful flatbread, whatever it is. Teach them a skill that they can own. Too often our kids think we're the maid, right? We're the maid, we're the mom, we're the housekeeper. Make it fun. Tell them here are things they can accomplish. Okay, let's see. Anybody else here in the chat box? Well, Dina, we did this in an hour. You've never heard me only talk in an hour before. I usually talk 3 hours.
Thank you, Nancy. This was really helpful and we really enjoyed it. It is a tough time, and as you said, we should all take it easy on ourselves, and pretty soon it'll be all over.
Well, yes, and we don't know what that looks like, but we're adapting, and thank God for technology, right? This would have been much worse without the fact that we can see each other and interact, and Facebook and all of these things where we can reach out, but call people, make a telephone call. Well, I know you all are very hungry. It is almost the end of the day. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty soon it'll be time for Ramadan iftar.
Yes, and I will send some of these resources I've used today, especially for Suzanne, who's in the medical fields, because there's a lot of people have been writing about how to deal, how to cope a little bit better and look, after this is over, our healthcare professionals, our school teachers, these are essential workers that we never paid attention to, right? Oh, the teachers teach. Yeah, I'll go see a nurse. No, you've kept people alive and our families together.
True.
Yes, sure. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Dina. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yes, I appreciate